Hey guys, today I'll be doing a different type of video where I'll be doing an interview over someone who I met through the Refold Discord server. And he's really, really good, maybe even better than me in some cases. So I just wanted to do an interview exploring what his journey has been like and what his techniques are. So yeah, how are you doing today?
Thanks for having me so much, Gio. My name's Cole. I've been learning Spanish for a really long time now, actually, almost half my life. And so I feel like I've learned a lot of things over that time, and my journey's been somewhat unique to, especially a lot of people in the immersion learning sphere.
That's
So,
great. So when did you start learning Spanish?
so earliest, I mean, I grew up in Texas, so there's some exposure just as a really young kid in some simple classes, maybe even like as early as like kindergarten, first grade and stuff. But I would really stay my start was sixth grade. A third of the year we had a Spanish class, a third of the school year. So maybe that was 2 months or so. And then seventh grade, from seventh grade on, I had Spanish classes pretty much every single year of my entire life, which is a lot.
And these are classes
Uh,
that you signed up for because you want to learn Spanish, or was it something that your parents did?
um, no, it was actually always interest driven, actually from the earliest start, I would say. Maybe in school you have to take a language, and I was like, oh yeah, of course Spanish, because it wasn't much of a thought. I was always like vaguely interested in Spanish. I wanted to know what fluency was like, what it would be like, but I never had like that much motivation early on, and so it was just like high school classes. Didn't have that much interest. College, growing interest, more classes, and then later on, university or classes.
Okay, I see. So you said you got interested in like university. That's when you really started getting into it.
Yeah, I would say actually just the summer right after high school is when the biggest there's two. I mean, I would say the summer after high school because then I that was the first time I really took a deep dive on my independent study and really putting a lot of hours in.
Okay, so what was your technique back then? What were you doing?
Oh boy. So back then, still pretty clueless about a lot of things. What I spent most of my time doing that summer was I did a lot of memorize. But basically, I read Ender's Game, which was my first novel. So my first novel was like 5 years after learning. I read Ender's Game in Spanish, which I'd already read in English, which was really hard at that time, I remember. And then I literally made a memorize. It wouldn't be, I'm used to saying Anki flashcard, but it would be a memorize entry, I guess, for every single word I didn't know in the whole book. And so a lot of it was like collecting the words that I didn't know into a doc and then putting them in memorize and then reviewing them. And that was like a ton of work. And I also watched some Spanish TV then. And I also watched a bunch of dubbed anime movies. That was the first thing that I watched that was comprehensible and like fun.
Man, so were you doing like so you were doing every single word that you came across in the dubbed anime and in TV shows too?
No, no, not in the material. I just watched it. Maybe looked up stuff here and there that I thought was interesting, but mostly just enjoyed it. Um, and then it was just the novel that I like went like super crazy on,
Okay.
the lookups and stuff.
So for I'm not really familiar with Memorize. I have tried it a couple times, but is it kind of like Anki where you set up flashcards and you have a certain amount of time to review it every day?
It's way less powerful than Anki. Basically, anything you do in Memrise, you can do in Anki, and you can do it better. Memrise is there's created courses as well. How it works is you just pops up with a word and you type in the answer. So it's basically a flashcard. It's like an Anki flashcard where it's a type in the answer card. And so you type in the card and you get it right. And so it has a pretty weak algorithm, and you can you're just more limited in every areas. But yeah, it's essentially that. There can be audio, there can be some images too, but it's mainly centered on courses that other people create. It's not so much centered on building your own courses. There was actually a whole schism with like they removed user created courses for a period of time. Like it's a mess.
Okay.
But yeah,
So how much time in a day would you say that you're studying Spanish every day?
at that point, because so before that I was super inconsistent, but like during that summer, oh, easily 3 hours I'd say. But that wasn't. I mean, that's just one summer, right? That's 3 months or so. But yeah, maybe 3 to 4. I don't. It's hard to say. Probably three, closer to three.
Okay. Then what did you do after that summer?
Well, after that summer, I started college, and so I took Spanish. I mean, I placed into. It's like there's like two series of classes. There's like the language series, and then there's like the literature series. at the college I went to. So I just placed into the lowest. I went to the lowest literature series, and so it's like 2A, 2B, 2C, 2D. Um, well, maybe 2D. So yeah, I basically started taking classes at my university.
Okay, so at this point, what would you say that your level was? Like, could you speak at all, or um, were your listening skills good, or what?
I would say I would be like a mid-ish, mid to high intermediate-ish like level. Like I knew my vocabulary wasn't the best. Like there's still a lot of grammar structures I didn't know. I could communicate pretty well. Like classroom speech is like no problem. Like that's my bread and butter. Like just general like understanding the teacher and stuff like that. Um, it is hard. I would just say like a mid intermediate is if that makes sense. Mid to high intermediate is like around there. Like I had a lot of conscious knowledge about grammar and stuff, so I could write okay. Um, but I just lacked like I didn't have much mass exposure to listening or reading at that point. So it's
Okay,
just yeah.
so and how many years into Spanish was that at that point?
Um, that was like 6 years in, I guess. Because yeah,
Okay,
13 I would say is the start, and that was like 19. Yeah, so six. That was 6 years in.
okay. So I mean, I don't really want to say the F word in describing your abilities. Fluency, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so were there any, I'm curious, were there any Spanish natives at your college that you got to talk to?
Oh yeah, a lot. And I don't know if we'll get to the quote unquote F word later, but yeah, I definitely wasn't fluent at that point, according to myself. That came later. I have a pretty good idea of when I would consider myself fluent too. But natives, um, yeah, so natives were later because so I had the earlier level university classes, but then I took three upper div Spanish classes, and there's quite a few natives in those. So that's like the first time. So maybe third year of college, so like eighth year of Spanish learning
Okay,
was when I yeah was starting to interact with native Spanish speaker students in my classes.
so I guess how should I phrase this? Like when you talked with them, did you learn a lot of new stuff, or was it where like you basically get all the new information from your immersion in TV shows and then got to talk to them from that?
I guess it's still like I still wouldn't say I was like a crazy immersion learner or anything at this point. Like not even at all. Like because I would do classes and I would do some watching and reading outside, but not like a ton. And I wouldn't do that much speaking in class either. So it was a lot of listening to the teacher, and I would also listen for the mistakes of my classmates. I feel like I got a lot of use out of that because I would constantly just like in my head like notice their mistakes and get reinforcement on that errors. And then like when I had natives in class, it's like listening to like how they structure things, how the teacher lectures and talks about things. So it's just like input from natives in that way. It was a lot of it. It was just classroom input.
Okay, so when would you consider yourself to be, I'm using the F word, but I'm not gonna use the F word, but proficient in Spanish?
Proficient. So I felt really comfortable and proficient when I was like basically 21. So 22. Wait, so actually after so I graduated. So not in undergrad. After undergrad, actually I was a lot over. After undergrad, I had like a 1 year break. Um, I had a 1 year break, and then I went and I started taking some classes in preparing to like apply to a master's program in Spanish. And basically 1 year after that program, so like the year leading up to it, I studied a lot of Spanish, and then I had 1 year more of practice, and that year I interacted with a lot more native speakers because I was taking much higher Spanish classes. Some were graduate classes, and some weren't. And so after that year, then I really started to feel good. So that would have been I was must have been 23. So that would have 22, 23. Wait, so because oh gosh, I should have figured out my timeline. Wait, let me think about this. We can cut here and then let me
Okay,
just think. So actually, so the I would consider it about 3 years ago was the first time I was actually considering myself quite proficient in and comfortable in Spanish.
okay,
We'll
I
avoid the
see.
effort.
And you said that you're doing a master's program in Spanish as well?
Uh-huh, right now, yeah.
Oh, that was really cool. So that you really like wanted to go all in with, I guess, your Spanish journey throughout your life.
Yeah, it was more like yeah, I like what I studied economics and didn't really have the passion there. I like went I did this internship that was loosely related. Just didn't really care for the business world. Just I knew I liked languages a lot, and so I did tutoring and really was still into like the whole language thing from that. And I was like, it's like, oh, I really like teaching from tutoring. That was like super fun to me. And then I just was like, okay, I'll pursue the teaching thing more, and then hence the master's program. So yeah, going in more
That's
in with
great.
Spanish.
So at this level, I guess you said you were proficient at this period of time in your life. So, do you know the DELE or the DELE scale of like A1 to C2? So
Hmm.
where on that scale would you say you were at that time?
It's funny because I went through there so many times where I thought I was C2. I feel like along my journey, it's like 3 years. I was like, oh yeah, now I'm C2. Wait, or like high C1, and it's just like there's so many times where you just think you're better than you are, and I like I've been learning 13 years, so there's a lot of that. But I would say right now I'm pretty confident I could pass the test. I like to make a distinction between the criteria of the test and being able to pass the test. So could I pass the test? I think almost certainly. Do I meet all the C2 criteria? No, because I don't know if we'll get to that because I feel like my listening is not C2 level yet.
Yeah, that's actually a great segue into my next question, which is if you had to like rate all of your abilities of speaking, writing, listening, and reading on a scale, then what would be the what would be the scale? What would be the highest one, lowest one?
Yeah, so I think this is pretty easy, and it's also going to be really different from the typical refolder immersion learner journey, I think. I would rate it as reading is the strongest, even though I haven't read too much compared to a lot of people. I've definitely been ramping up the reading this year. I was ramping up. Next year, I'm going to ramp it up even more. Reading is just, I like, it's like one of my passions. I love it. And um, it's just, I think high level English vocab helps with reading ability and all kinds of things go into reading ability. I don't, reading's number one. I think writing is the next strongest suit. Writing that comes in from um, just really being interested in grammar, being somewhat pedantic and really critical of myself and of others, and that helps me like really nail down a lot of mistakes. I remember way back like writing stuff and being so frustrated because every single thing I wrote would have like a ton of mistakes, and it just felt like impossible to like write something like that didn't have like a ton of
Right.
mistakes. Now, like it's been so long, so many classes, so many graded assignments, so many essays. Writing is, I feel really strong. It's like probably, I mean, it's really on par, I feel like, with a lot of natives. And then speaking would be next, I would say. I feel pretty comfortable, especially in certain situations. I mean, obviously, classroom setting, really casual conversation with friends and informal situations. And like a lot of situations, I feel much, much, much better about my speaking now. And which means listening is my worst skill, I would say, because when I think back, it's like, I mean, there's still areas where I get lost with like conversations with natives, which was really disheartening after all this time. And like, I haven't really watched that many shows or TV shows, way less than a ton of people and learners. Just haven't watched that many shows, haven't watched that many movies, um, or podcasts, or even audiobooks. Just there's just a whole lot. I still think my listening is good, but it's just um, it feels like the least comfortable. Like I feel comfortable when I speak. I feel comfortable when I write. I feel comfortable when I read. But listening, there's always I have that feeling that's like, oh, like I could be if I'm off my game or if it's something I'm unfamiliar with, like I'll just I can there's like gaps and I like they're more noticeable and annoying for me. So
Yeah, that's interesting.
definitely
Go ahead.
sorry. So yeah, I guess just to sum it up, yeah, it's just so it's reading, writing, speaking, listening.
Yeah, for me, like my speaking is by far the time where I feel the most uncomfortable. I feel like I'm always gonna screw up or make a mistake. So, yeah, actually, this is a good time to mention. So, what area or what country, like of the Spanish region, did you get yourself into, or did you um, immerse yourself a lot with? Was it like Latin America or Spain or a specific country?
Yeah, so it's pretty much two. I'm like a double focus into Spain and Mexico.
Okay, I see.
Spain is the only country well, I visited Mexico and Spain and Costa Rica actually, but I lived in Spain for those 2 weeks. That was the big spark for like wanting to get good at Spanish, like really good, even though it wasn't like that big of a deal for my like language like improvement, I guess, or getting better. And then Mexico, just being in Texas and being in California, which is where I am now, it's really close to Mexico. Been in Mexico many times, and all the vast majority of the native speakers that I interact with on a daily, semi-daily, or throughout the years have been Mexican speakers. So very comfortable with those two dialects, and I just love Spain. So it's like Mexican, it's like more like social oriented, and some of the media, and then Spain, it's a lot more like media driven, um, history even,
Yeah, there's
linguistics.
a lot of TV shows that come from Spain, at least on Netflix, right?
Oh yeah, mixes for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah.
So I guess we kind of already went over this part, but what would you say that your strengths and your weaknesses are, and just all around?
Just in general, yeah. Um, yeah, like and like areas I need to improve. Let me think.
It could be domains.
Yeah, domains as well. Um, let I think. Oh, I haven't read that many classics, so like reading of like some classics, I guess, would be a weakness. I still feel like, I mean, there's regional weaknesses in everywhere that's not Mexico and Spain. Um, what about areas? Oh, I have to think about this. Wait, this sounds so conceited. I'm trying to like think of my weaknesses. No, but
No, you can do
there
it.
are actually weaknesses. Pronunciation wise, like I'm still working on, there's areas I'm working on, especially with regards to the R. And recently I'd like have been really aware of like the R after certain letters where I mess up, like namely I think S, which yeah. And actually we were talking about it. We were basically talking about it in Refold with the S like R, a trill R followed by like sorry, follow like a trilled R that follows an S is quite challenging, and I've been kind of pronouncing it wrong. Actually, even S or R, trilled R after N as well. There's some areas there with pronunciation that are still not that are very noticeably not native and wrong. I think speaking wise, just still working on flow and um, speed can be there a bit better, and accuracy with um, what I'm saying is it's not perfect. Oh God, this is so rambly. Let me rethink about this. So there's pronunciation wise, there's those sounds. Um,
If you have to think this much, that means you're probably really good.
No, that's not because it's
Yeah.
I'm literally just trying to think of like what are good categories. We kind of covered some of it, but I think for general strengths, um, I have a ton of grammar and conscious knowledge, even as it pertains to like um proper like punctuation and orthography and stuff like that. I learned a lot of that in a translation class, which was phenomenal. Oh, speaking of, actually, another strength is translation. From how I went about learning Spanish, I did a lot of heavy translation, so I feel like I'm really good at translating compared to the average person. Um,
Now, how did you do that? Like, if you had a novel in Spanish, you just translated it to English?
no, not even. It's just like I think it's from relying on translating to English in my head a lot. I mean, I had a translation class, which was interesting, but I think most of it was like I ingrained a lot of translations from like just looking up. I didn't know about the monolingual transition back in the day, or like that was a thing. So I heavily relied on just looking up words in a bilingual dictionary, and so I got really strong associations with certain words with their like Spanish words with their English counterpart. Um, so I think, I mean, indirectly, I don't, I think it hinders me in some cases, but not too much. And then it also has the bonus of like being able to translate rapidly text. So I think translation, strengths-wise, translation, grammar, punctuation, orthography, conscious knowledge stuff, really like knowing the official forms of certain things, and reading in general. And if we're going on weaknesses, it's like there's pronunciation um, artifacts that are still wrong, especially with the trill R, like S before trill and N before trill
Could you give an
can still
example?
be.
Like, what words?
Yeah, so like perros rojos. If you're saying perros rojos, apparently S is not or R is not fully trilled after an S, then quick speech. So um, it would say we were trying to figure it out in like, refloat Spanish, but for example, it maybe it'd be something like wait, oops, perros rojos, rojos, something like a j or something like that, voiced thing. Like it's definitely not a trilled R though, because it's just actually impossible. The tongue cannot go from a sr quickly enough to be natural. So we listen to native, it's like they don't trill the R after S's in quick speech. They do something else, and if after N you have to change the position of how you pronounce an N, so that it can flow into a trill as well. There's different N pronunciations. If you haven't studied linguistics, you probably think all the N's are the same, all the L's are the same. They vary a lot, or at least to some degree. So there's definitely areas to work on in there. Um, Same with some vowels. Some vowels, it's not perfectly consistent. Anyways, a lot of little ticky-tacky pronunciation things to work on. A lot of, I think my biggest gap is colloquial language and slang because I like reading a lot and I've been in a classroom setting. I know a lot of formal academic, I'm like super strong in those areas. A lot of the slangier expressions, colloquialisms, idioms, how you express certain ideas is still not fully developed. Even like, especially like even like modern slang and stuff like that in Spain and Mexico. Definitely, I know some of it, but it doesn't feel like as comfortable. Whereas like it feels like there's tons of gaps that can lead there. And then aside from that, you have regionalisms. Anywhere that's not Mexico and Spain, still kind of a lot. I mean, I'll just have very basic understanding of Argentinian or Colombian, Spanish, or and outside of that, it's really bad.
That's
I
right
think those
though.
are the biggest gaps. Yeah,
Yeah. So I guess what can you not talk about? Is there like a certain domain that you have trouble with?
a lot. One of the biggest ones I realized is because there was a classmate I had that we were gonna he brought up the NBA and I was like, oh, I'm like so excited to talk about the NBA, but then he brought it up in Spanish. And then that was when I realized I literally cannot talk about the NBA in Spanish like at all. Like I just didn't even have any words to bring with. Like I'm so used to this domain in English. It was just nothing. Like I even know some words like shoot and like obviously basketball and stuff, but it's not like it wasn't enough to like actually form like natural thoughts in about basketball in Spanish.
Right.
There's a lot of stuff like that though that
Okay.
I can't do.
I guess we should probably move over to Anki because I think you do use that or have used that. So how has Anki played into your studies?
Yeah, so after Memrise, I moved to Anki once I realized about it. That's pretty soon actually when I learned about mass immersion approach at the time, now Refold. Um, Anki, so I haven't used it too much for Spanish. I used it in the early days. I liked so what I was doing since I was already really good and I didn't need to know like recognition. What I advocate somewhat is to do production cards, which what I mean by that is like it's easy to know. There's certain things that are easy to recognize in Spanish because they'll be a direct cognate. But if you want to actively know them and use them like in your speech, then it's not really good enough to just easily recognize a cognate because it practically tells you the answer. So one of my favorite examples is um, like an element like carbon. So of course, if you see carbon, if you see carbono, you know it's carbon. If it's going to be in the context of science or an element or something, it's pretty easy to know that. But it doesn't really help you because if you're going to produce it, you probably draw on carbon or something similar, and or carbona or anything else, and then you might just have no idea. And carbon means like charcoal, I believe. So that's just completely different. So it's actually just not helpful to have just well, it's one, it's not helpful to just have that knowledge, and two, it's not helpful to have an Anki card that just has Carbono on the front because it's just too obvious. So to remedy that with a lot of certain phrases and things, I would just put the English on the front, and then I have to come up with Spanish, which breaks a cardinal rule of like those strong English Spanish associations. But I found that that wasn't that big of an issue for me, and especially as an advanced learner, it's not an issue. So I use it that way a lot, and um, I think I even tried Ankiing in English a bit, but I stopped doing that. I think that's because I try to use link um, sentence fragments instead of whole sentences, which was a bit annoying. But I think going forward, how I would use Anki is essentially vocab cards that have a sentence on the back for context. So if I learn a new verb, see if I can pull up the definition from my own memory, just active recall. And if I can't, then I have the sentence of the usage and the definition. And then for certain cognate words, you just put the English on the front.
Okay, so you put the Spanish word on the front and then just a sentence in which it's used on the back.
In the definition.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's really interesting. You can say something.
No.
Okay,
I don't think
yeah.
so.
So that's actually really interesting how you use English definitions instead of using like only Spanish to Spanish definitions. So I guess you said that that helped your active recall in terms of being able to recall the words? Like, have you tried? Oh, good.
Oh yeah, I would say it helps its recall. I think I don't know. I hate to pull up. I think there's a study, but I think there is a study that shows that that active recall was better um, for translations of terms instead of native language or target language definitions. And I find that to be the case because I can pull on the translation much easier, help the words stick more. But
Interesting. So if, like, in your mind, if you're trying to build, like, if you're trying to reconstruct your brain in Spanish, wouldn't you want to have, because, and Spanish natives, they can, like, recall words just as well as any other natives. So wouldn't you think that eventually, like, trying to go really hard and trying to, I guess, try to force yourself to do Spanish definitions would help your active recall? Or do you think that it won't work for a non-native?
I think the focus on definitions might be slightly misplaced because the focus on immersion might be just better. I don't think anybody learns a word just because of a definition, and the definition's often just a hint, and then there's all these other parts of word knowledge, like what words it's used with, its connotation, if it's archaic or modern. There's a ton of different aspects of word knowledge. So I think immersion kind of makes that all wash anyways with the definitions. So I mean nowadays it's just like if I find a definition that's more useful in Spanish, I use it in Spanish. And if I find a definition that's um, works in English that I find like no issues with, then I use it in English. So
Okay, I see. So another question is, what is the greatest length you've gone to improve your Spanish? Like, what's the craziest thing you've done to, like, improve it?
yeah, I don't know if I've done anything like too crazy. I mean, I initially I had this idiom dictionary to improve my idioms, and so I decided I would make an Anki card out of every idiom in that idiom dictionary, but I had to do this manually, and so it was a lot of intensive copy pasting. It was a 5,000 idiom dictionary, I think. So it was like I'd place the idiom on the front, and then I would have um, I'd have the synonym idioms because there's a ton of idioms that mean the same thing, and then I had the story of the idiom. The etymology of the idiom was, I think, well, one, it was interesting to know the etymology of some of these idioms, and two, it was to help you remember it. But creating these idiom cards and reviewing the idiom cards, um, that was an insane endeavor. It was somewhat enjoyable. I might return to it in a way because I know. So I got through. It was an alphabetical order. I got through. I was on like the C's, I think. There's just a ton of A idioms, but what I realized from that is a lot of idioms take a similar format. Um, I know one of the big ones was armarse una something or un something. So uh, as like
To
to
throw a
raise
fit?
like yeah to throw a fit, raise hell,
Yeah.
for there to be a big conundrum. There's a ton of like similarly
I think
formatted
that's
idioms like
Mexican
that.
slang, isn't it?
No, this was a Spain idiom dictionary. So certain
Okay.
they use I know I just saw actually armarse una grande
Pataleta?
um it was una grande. It was I think that's an Andalusian one. Might be dated as well. I don't know if that was just one I just saw lately, but there's a ton of armarse un something. Un jaleo I think is one. There's a
Oh,
bunch.
that's it. That's it.
Un
Yeah.
jaleo. Yeah, but I think these are well, I don't know if they're Mexican, but they're at least Spanish. I know that for sure. But yeah, anyways, there's a ton.
Yeah.
And I like it seemingly it's like, okay, you're gonna memorize a 5,000 idioms. Like, well, kind of, but kind of not, because you're gonna make connections between idioms, between what you know, etymology, some more cultural understanding. So that was interesting. And I think even though I failed at that, that was like quite an undertaking. I mean, other than that, I guess that first novel was a pain going through every single word I didn't know, marking it, making a memorized card out of it. That was a lot. And
Yeah.
I read the whole, actually, that was the abridged version, though. The whole orthography, what was it? Uh, la ortografía básica de la lengua española or something like that.
Okay.
Read the whole thing. That was partly for a class, too, but um,
Okay.
I don't know.
So, oh, go ahead.
No, that's it, actually. Sorry.
Don't you think it's actually pretty interesting how you said that? I actually have like it wasn't really a dictionary, but it was kind of like a blog post where someone posted like a list of idioms. And there was like maybe 20 or 25 pages, and I went through that. But I guess what stopped me from doing like an idiom dictionary was thinking that maybe people don't use this idiom, or it might be from like the 70s or 80s, or you might just not know it, and you might come off as too pretentious or People might just might laugh at you for you not knowing what you're doing.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point. I think if you take on these big Anki projects with like regards to some domain, like idioms especially or something else, I think you can only really what's the word argue that it's like a good use of time if you're immersing in that domain. So like if you're watching colloquial Spain television at the same time that you're doing this crazy idiom journey, and then any idiom you hear, well, one, you're going to be primed to listen for idioms in the shows, and then two, you're going to be primed to see if you hear an idiom that you've been learning. So I think in that case, then it's good. Or for example, if you're onking a domain of math and you're not reading a math textbook or something in Spanish, and then I don't I think like that's where it can really shine. It's like you're immersing in the domain and you're unking that domain. Or if you're reading a text, a religious text, and then you're immersing or you're unking all these kind of obscure religious cards. I think these go hand in hand because like otherwise, yeah, you certainly will fall into the trap of if you try to use one of these idioms, you have no idea if it's used in the modern day or whatnot, or if they even understand it, or
Yeah,
there's a lot that goes into that idiom knowledge as well. So
you have to be careful. I think one time I heard an idiom in a Spanish movie, and I ended up using it like in text, and the other person was from I think a South American country or something, and they didn't know it. So yeah, you have to be careful.
yeah. I mean, wait, how did they take that though? They're like, oh my gosh, this guy's using an idiom that
I
he's
mean, like
just making up
literally,
Spanish or
literally, like I have no idea what this word means. Like, can you explain it to me?
oh yeah, I
Yeah,
mean, because I think if you're really confident in like that, you know this is a correct idiom and yada yada, explaining it's fine. But yeah,
and it even showed up in the dictionary, but yeah, I guess I didn't know it.
I
Okay,
mean, there's that
yeah,
gets in a whole another thing about like what natives know and don't know, and like you can use things that are correct, but like some people will not, but that
right.
it's correct.
So
Matt had that issue with
yeah,
all his knowledge.
it seems like you've been, I guess your motivation has gone up and down over the years. So have you ever, or what keeps you motivated, and have you ever completely lost motivation?
So many times. I mean, like I said, my motivation was very weak for the early part of my journey. It was just like, oh, I'll take these classes. I kind of want to be fluent eventually, but I don't know if I'll ever get there. But it's languages are interesting. So I kind of stayed in that state of like, no, I didn't. I early on, I just took classes. I didn't do much outside at all. And then so like then in high school, it was like, oh, I had interest, but it wasn't like quite enough. I would do some stuff, and then I would get like burned out, and I'd be like, okay, whatever, and then stop it. And so until after, well, even after like that summer where I like had the breakthrough and was more consistent, it was still not far from perfectly consistent. There's still times where I was like, oh, I'm really interested in this, and then not, and then I got interested in some other languages, and then they died. But Spanish was kind of like was more or less steady, a lot of up and downs. And then even right now, I mean, it's been somewhat consistent because it's such a big part of my life nowadays. But I would say right now, like goal wise, it's like just I don't know if we'll get yeah, but like yeah, so yeah, a lot of ups and downs, I guess.
Okay. And have you ever completely lost motivation?
Completely lost motivation, as in like
Maybe,
considered dropping Spanish period, like period, or
maybe what's the longest break that you've taken?
phew, 13 years. I actually don't know. I mean, the longest break, like I mean, I think with like no Spanish because like it's hard to like do you consider like doing some of it is like doing a class and like I'm not like I don't really care and I'm not really doing any Spanish outside of it. I mean, that's the thing actually. I've had consistent exposure to Spanish in some form, whether I wanted to or not, like over a
Mm,
long period of time. So consistent, I mean, maybe like 200 days or something. I don't really know.
that's a,
Um,
that's a pretty long time.
uh-huh.
So I guess earlier you said that you've talked with native Spanish speakers in college, and that's how you got a little bit better. So how do native Spanish speakers really treat you nowadays? Since I think you're pretty good. Do they treat you as native?
Oh, certainly not. I would say it depends in the situation. Um, I think like over text, I think if I like pretend to be a native, it could work for quite a while. Maybe the only thing that would give me away is like I would be too pedantic with the accents and stuff on all my speech. But um, I think it's just like yeah, I don't think I could fake to be a native for much more than you know a minute really. I think it's just too hard and like there's too many artifacts with my speech as it is right now, especially with the with regards to like trilidars and such, and I have to be really warmed up and all this other stuff. But
Okay.
um,
Yeah. So what would you, I guess wrapping things up a little bit, what is your end goal, or what keeps you doing this? Why do you want to do this?
why do I want to do this? Yeah, I mean, it started off just like I wonder what's fluency like, and then I got really obsessed with like interested in like native level and like that, like beginning of like MIA and stuff, a mass immersion approach and refill. Now it's like it's still kind of a fascination with like the process and like how it changes and like how good you can get. I know I had really negative thoughts about like, oh well, if I do another language, it's like, well, I'll never get as good as I got at Spanish, and well, I'm not even that good at Spanish, so like, why even go down that road?
And don't be humble.
But
You're pretty good.
well, I had this thought many times. I mean, I'm okay. It's so hard to get over that. Like, oh, am I good now or not? That's but anyways, like I think part of it, it's like I think I'm finally. I use Link, a program called Link a lot,
I've
and
heard
in
of
that
that.
program, you can really what really jumps out at you is the words that you don't know because they'll show up in blue, and so then you'll link it, so you can really get a sense. The more and more you learn and use the program, the fewer no words that show up. And so you do, in one hand, it's an illusion because it's like, oh, eventually I'll just mark all the words no, there'll be no words. But I'm chasing native level, like what I consider native level, because I can compare about how many words I know in English to how many words I know in Spanish. And so I can do like a word coverage percentage in a way. And so I'm basically chasing like what I would like English level in Spanish to some degree. And I think that's interesting and to see what like that is because even after all this time, it's like the more I think about it, it's like you get really good and then you spend a ton of time in the language and then you get actually good. That's how I've been thinking about it. And I still haven't read that many books. I still haven't watched that many shows. So it's not like some of these people where it's like, oh, I already read 100 books and I already like watched like 2,000 hours worth of shows and it's like, oh, okay, I'm done. That's like, well, I haven't done that and I'm actually pretty good already. So if I just like read a ton and do a ton more listening, then where will I be at? So it's like I'm kind of at this point where it's like I want to explore, keep exploring, keep like put that time in and like explore the culture more, and it's just more fun now because it's so much less effort, and just see what kind of ability that leads me and like how good can I get? And that question is kind of what keeps me going, I guess. Like what is native level? What can I get to? And what kind of insights can I learn about that along the way, I guess.
Yeah, it's like, what can you do in what can you do in Spanish that you can't do in English? Or sorry, the other
Yeah.
way around. What can you do in
Okay.
uh
English, yeah,
yeah,
English that I can't do in
yeah.
Spanish. I
It's
mean,
like
there's so much though right now.
yeah.
Yeah,
So I
it's funny
guess
because it's
oh,
like
go
I
ahead.
never even had the slightest illusion that like my Spanish was close to my English because I like English too much. That's another issue, but yeah, I just like English too much and it's too comfortable, and I like want to improve my English as well.
But you're a native speaker, right?
Yeah, I'm a native speaker,
Yeah.
but I feel like I like want to improve like my vocab, I guess, and stuff, just general knowledge.
Has your Spanish ever helped you with your English vocab in terms of like cognates and words like that?
So many cognates, and I don't even realize it sometimes when I'm like talking to students. Be like, oh yeah, but what's a good example? I mean, one of the ones I like, there's some really obscure English words that like are common in Spanish. So like quotidian is one, like cotidiano. Cotidiano is a common word in Spanish for every day, like daily. And then there's quotidian in English, which is really obscure. But if you know these obscure English words, it's like actually really nice because you just make that easy leap. I think I don't know. There's a lot of examples like that with like a really obscure English word, it's a Spanish word, and like especially with like the technical Spanish words, then it's just like everywhere.
I've
Like,
heard grandiloquente.
oh yeah, grandiloquent. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's see, I knew that word in English, way before I knew it in Spanish.
It sounds
Yeah,
like one of those
it's
words that you sound so um, like a try hard if you try to use it in English.
I don't, yeah, it depends. Yeah, I think so. It depends on the context and when you use it. Most
Right.
contexts, yeah, for sure, you would sound pretty weird.
Okay. So um, you've come this far. So are you planning on taking any tests in the future to just kind of prove that your level is that good, or taking any DELE tests?
Yeah, I'm definitely been toying around with the idea of going to and taking a C2 next year. For one, just to see how it is, to see what I score, but also just like some kind of marker of like, oh, okay, I am actually C2. That would be nice, like to just say and like just know it's like, oh, okay, fine. I actually did reach some kind of C2 because for like so many times it's like, oh, am I C1? Am I C2? What am I? So yeah, next year probably gonna take a C2 and see. I think you're planning on taking a C2 as well as if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, well, the one closest to my house is still has it's still like locked down because of COVID stuff. So it's kind of annoying because like every other building in the entire country is open, but the one closest to my house in May is just not open.
Oh, I
Yeah,
see. That is really unfortunate. Yeah, I'm gonna just have to go. I don't know. I think my friend tossed around the idea of going to like Chicago or something like that to take a test and meet up. So
yeah,
I don't know. I'm strongly considering it though. I definitely at some point I feel like I'll do a C2, but I feel like next year is a really good year to do it.
right. Okay, so that's pretty much wraps up almost everything I want to talk about. So what's one piece of advice that you would give to anyone watching who's learning Spanish or any other language who wants to get better?
So I don't know. If anybody knows me, I'm a reading stan. I just think reading is the most powerful tool, and I think it's hard to know. I had a really weird journey, and I did a lot of things, and like it's like kind of hard for me to say like, oh, what did I do to get good? But I feel really strongly that reading is a powerful tool, and if you supplement with even more listening than I did, then you're never gonna have a problem. So I think my biggest tip is read more and read a bit easier stuff. Because even though like I think I'm like good, like I'm shocked, always shocked about like how much I can learn and like gain from like easier content or content that I would think is like, oh, I'm above this now. For example, like young adult fiction. So I think read more and read easier is my favorite tip.
Okay, thank you. And where can people find you on social media?
You can find me in the Refold Discord under the name Hulk, and then nowhere else really. I don't really use social media outside of Discord, if you want to call that social media. But I may have a YouTube channel in 2022, so we'll see.
Nice.
I guess stay tuned.
New Year's goals.
New Year's goals, absolutely. Yep.
Yeah. Well, thank you for talking. I hope we can
Thanks so
talk
much for
again
this
soon.
opportunity.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was
Thank you.
great. I'm excited to see your journey as well, and you motivate me a lot. So
You
I
do the
want to
same
get
for
even
me.
better. Awesome.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.